Let me just start off by saying that McFarlane looks to me like the dude that gets a hard on just from looking at himself in the mirror. He's the type of dude that probably gives himself chocolates and flowers for Valentine's Day. Like, it's very clear cut that the dude is absolutely obsessed with himself and he thinks very highly of his own character. And honestly, I don't really have necessarily like a straightforward problem with it. I like the confidence. I like the fact that it's always like oozing out of his pores. But I feel like, and this is really the topic of the entire video, he really missed an opportunity with the new Page Punchers line. And I know it's not necessarily like quote unquote new, although there is a new iteration of it. But from the moment that he announced this particular line, and I've made a video maybe like 2-3 years ago talking about it, but essentially I thought that this was a really big opportunity for McFarlane. He could really shake up the industry, not only for action figure collectors, but also comic book collectors. Now, I'm not sure how powerful or how influential McFarlane is within the industry. I'm assuming that he's one of the big heavy hitters. And again, I'm not sure if DC would have allowed him to do something like this, but I felt like he just missed a huge opportunity here. He could have potentially given us some like groundbreaking comic book stuff that was spec worthy, stuff that maybe was out of circulation for quite some time, and he was going to give collectors a second wind or another opportunity at some of these comic books that right now are probably in the like 20 to 30, maybe even $50 range raw. And I will say the Page Punchers line has gone a little bit better over the years. I remember back in the day, if you wanted to pick up a wave, you were essentially getting the exact same comic book over and over. Now he's actually switched it up to where if there's like a wave of like 3 to 4 different figures, you'll at least get like 1 through 3 or 1 through 4 of that particular comic book run. Not only that, from time to time, or at least one of the newest waves I think came with exclusive comic book covers that were only for the Page Punchers line. That's insane to me, the fact that he was able to get a comic book artist to do specific comic book covers or exclusive covers just for his line. To me, that was kind of like him trying to switch up the line, trying to give consumers something innovative and creative that I don't think that anybody had done at that particular moment in time. I think the Marvel Legends Toy Biz action figures back in the day that came with a comic book, I think those had some that were comic book or some that had exclusive covers for those lines, but we haven't seen anything like that in the past few years, and I thought that was kind of a good step forward in the correct direction. However, if you look at some of the comic books that he's been releasing, they're absolutely worthless. Like, you have the Rebirth Batman issue number 1. Again, you can probably find that in dollar bins everywhere. You had that Black Adam issue number 1, which I already mentioned. You got the exact same comic book for every single character or every single figure that was in that particular wave, which varied, but usually it was like 4 different figures. So you were getting that issue number 1 over and over again at least 4 times. He also released that 4-inch Page Punchers Batman Beyond figure, which, by the way, that's a conversation in and of itself. The fact that he's deciding to do these tiny little 4-inch collectible action figures that nobody seems to be really that interested in. I think action figure collectors are definitely not interested in those. And then there are some comic book collectors that may pick these up, but I just don't think that that's something that appeals to a wider audience. But regardless, instead of going out there and doing his own comic book cover for like Batman Beyond issue number 1 as kind of like maybe a reprint or an exclusive cover to his particular Page Punchers line, not to say that it was going to be a $100 comic book right off the bat, because again, it would technically be a reprint or an exclusive cover to his line, so maybe it wouldn't have garnered as much value. And not that that's relevant, but instead of giving the people something crazy like that, he decided to just give them Batman Beyond number 1 Neo Year, which I think is one of the newer comic book runs. Kind of interesting and cool, but as I said at the beginning, these are issues that you can find in dollar bins. You can actually find them on eBay, with shipping included, for about like $6 to $7. He also had that Superman Rebirth issue number 1, which also a very affordable comic book. I've actually seen this in like the 50-cent bins Why would he include comic books that absolutely nobody has interest in? It's baffling to me. He also had that small 4-inch Batman Who Laughs 2-pack from not too long ago, which also could have included the Teen Titans issue number 12 from that 2017 run, which is technically the first appearance of Batman Who Laughs. That one right now, if you're looking for a good comic book or a good raw copy, you'll be paying anywhere from like 30 to 40, maybe even $50. He could have really shook up the community and decided to include this particular issue with this 2-pack. But as I said, continuously just giving us completely worthless comic books. I just don't know who these are supposed to appeal. Hardcore collectors that are into comic books already have most of these issues. They're in dollar bins. They probably already have like 3 to 4 of these, maybe because they decided to spec on these long term, but they probably were picking them up for either cover price or well under cover price in some cases. And then those that are only interested in action figures that don't really collect comic books, there's really no incentive there, because most of these figures, unless they were the 7-inch action figures, the 4-inch action figures really didn't appeal to them at all. I think the only one that has some spec worthiness, or actually there were a couple of comic books that had some spec worthiness to them, were that Batman and Robin issue number 1 that had like the Professor Pig's first appearance. And then there was that Rebirth Flash issue number 1 that had, I think, like Thomas Wayne as Batman as a first appearance. That was the time when, Flash decided to go back in time and change things, and the whole DC universe was in complete shambles. Those are probably 2 of the only comic books that come to mind, like off the top of my head, that had some spec worthiness and kind of had a little bit of value in the secondary market. And not to say that that should be an incentive for buying collectibles, but I think he would have been able to reel in way more consumers. It would have spiked a lot of interest within both communities. And I've already covered this extensively, but most of these page punchers, especially the 4-inch action figures with the comic book, even the 2-packs, I remember seeing them for as low as like $3 to $5 at my local Ross or at my local Walmart with, heavy discounts. And look, I'm a very small content creator. I have no idea how to run a business. McFarlane clearly knows way more than I do, but just from the outside looking in, it definitely feels like the Page Punchers line was a massive failure. Now, I do like some of the things that he's been doing over the past few months, like doing the whole comic book run for a little wave instead of having one issue over and over. He mixes it up by doing, 1 through 4 and then adding comic book covers that are exclusive to those particular Page Puncher waves. And look, I'm not sitting here telling him that he should start just mass producing a bunch of comic books that have a ton of value out in the third-party market, but I do like the fact that he's doing stuff where there are some minor key first appearances. As I mentioned, the Professor Pig is a perfect example of that. He could have done something for like maybe Punchline, who is a brand new modern character. The Flashpoint issue number 1 was also a pretty cool nod to collectors. I think that's probably one of the few outliers that I genuinely like to see on store shelves. Now, I have touched on this in the past and with previous videos, but there is the at least slight possibility that some of these comic books actually do garner some value in the long run. Just as I mentioned prior, like some of them have some very, very small spec potential. Like some of these do have some minor key appearances, or they're just like iconic comic book covers or iconic storylines. And so just having that issue alone gives it a little bit of value. But then in the long run, as I said, the more and more of these get opened up, the more and more of these comic books get damaged. I think in the foreseeable future, there might be like even a little category for McFarlane exclusive Page Puncher covers. And so, as I said, those could potentially have long-term value if you keep them in really good condition, and then maybe send some of these to the CGC to actually have them slabbed. Now, obviously, your main priority when it comes down to collecting, whether it's action figures or comic books, should just be to enjoy what it is that you're picking up. It shouldn't be to make some money off of those collectibles in the foreseeable future. That should never be a factor that plays a role. But because the comic book is being offered with an action figure, I do believe the comic book should add some value. It shouldn't just be like random paper that you throw in there. It should have, some sort of value to the person that's actually purchasing this particular collectible, whether it's like, good reading material, an amazing cover, or something that's spec worthy that they could hold on to and potentially keep in really good condition. But as I always say, that's just my personal opinion. That's my personal take. I feel like the Page Punchers line was just a really big missed opportunity. He could have done something special and unique with it, and instead it kind of just feels like another one of his offerings. And a prime example of how badly the situation was played out right in front of us. A ton of these were hitting the clearance sections and just were not flying off of store shelves, and a lot of it had to do with the fact that they just didn't have iconic comic book covers. It wasn't drawing people into the line. Let's not forget the Page Punchers, the 4-inch has a very small fan base, but then the 7-inch line, the people that are going in there, most of them are collecting just the action figure. So the comic book definitely has to add something. Let's not forget it's a $25 price point, and sometimes they minimize the accessories or the extra head sculpts or just the extras that the figure comes with for the sake of throwing in a comic book. So the comic book has to have something, or it has to offer something to the action figure collector. It can't just be something that they're gonna throw in a bin somewhere and just completely forget about it. And I think that's one of the main reasons why we see a lot of these figures go on sale, even the 7-inch line, because a lot of these collectors just don't see a lot of value in collecting these comic books that, again, long term don't really have a lot of value, and in the short term they're just not very good comic books. Sometimes they're pretty good reading material, but now you assume that that person is going to go out and complete that entire run. And let's say if it's like the old school Page Punchers, where you essentially got just the first issue of that comic book run, now you expect that that person that's probably only collecting action figures is going to go out and like buy a graphic novel because they read issue number 1. The chances of that happening are extremely slim. And so I just personally feel like McFarlane could have done a little bit better with his particular line. Now, I do feel like he's kind of trending in a good direction, adding multiple, or I should say adding different issues to a particular wave. You can get an entire comic book run, getting exclusive covers, and then eventually I think he's going to start giving us comic books that actually have value, that people are going to be really interested in. You have to draw more than just action figure collectors. I think you have to force some comic book collectors to jump in on the line, and that way the line is able to grow and just be overall really successful. But as I said, just my personal opinion. I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say. Do you guys enjoy the Page Punchers line, whether it's the 4-inch, the 7-inch? Do you guys enjoy it? Are you guys purchasing them? How many of them do you have in your collection, and which one is your favorite? Which one is your least favorite? Do you guys find any value to today's video? Let me know down below. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you guys enjoy this type of content, make sure to stay tuned. We do upload pretty consistently. I think we're close to almost on a daily basis. I want to ramp it up to at least on a daily basis. So like I said, if you guys enjoy this type of stuff, make sure to stay tuned. Stay safe out there, and as always, make sure to enjoy the hobby. That's the most important part of all this. I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.